Hey guys, Mono here with a new edition of my beginner's guide to Hella. I have done 3 of these guides before, as well as a 70 video guide for the game, so I've learned a lot over the past few years about what people struggle with in this game, and that's what this guide is for. It's intended for new players that have never played the game before, as well as those with 100, 200 hours or more, because trust me, there are many people out there playing that think they understand the game and have massive gaps in their knowledge. And I'll say this right now, if you don't feel like watching a long guide like this one to learn how to play Hella, then Hella is probably not the game for you. Alright, I'll divide the video in chapters, starting with what I think are the most important pieces of information, those that will benefit new players the most, and moving on to more specific topics later. If you want to get in depth into topics like how to command or map specific tactics, or which are the best weapons, then check out the video description for my guide playlist, which features all the guide videos I talked about. This year, Hella is getting a bunch of updates with new maps, new armies, and new game modes coming in that I couldn't possibly speculate on, so I will be going over the current game modes and features, as well as some tips that apply to the game as a whole. If you enjoy this content, then please subscribe to the channel. I'm currently sitting at 44,000 subscribers. The climb to 50,000 has taken very long, much longer than I would have hoped. So if you feel like making someone very happy, then please subscribe and share this video with any new players. Okay, in the first section, I will go over how to understand the flow of the game. This is because the most frequent complaint I've seen from new players is that Hella is a running simulator where you just run for 5 minutes and then you get shot from seemingly nowhere over and over again. And I'm pretty sure this is because looking at the map, it seems very similar to a Battlefield Conquest mode. So if you ask any new players where the enemies will be spawning at, where they expect the enemies to be, they would probably point right here. And that would be completely wrong. So let's start. Hella is more of a game about building and destroying spawn points than it is about capturing objectives. All spawn points are player built, and where they are built affects everything you see and you do in the game. Once you understand why that's the case, then you will start to find the matches much more enjoyable and engaging, because you will understand what is actually going on. You see, while capturing the objectives is ultimately what you need to do in order to win, these objectives don't provide your team with any tangible benefit. Capturing a point doesn't bleed the other team's tickets, it doesn't provide your team with more vehicles or resources, nor does it give you a place to spawn on. Nothing is ultimately immediately gained from capturing an area, so whether you take control at the start of the game or in the last 2 seconds, it doesn't really matter. So while in other games capturing an area gives you an edge at holding control of it, in Hella that is not the case. The only way for your team to actually control an objective and retain it is by building spawn points for your team around that point and by finding and destroying nearby enemy spawns. This is the fundamental difference between this game and any other shooter you've ever played. So if in Battlefield games, capturing an objective allows your team to spawn there, in Hella it's the other way around. Being able to spawn is what allows you to capture the objective in the first place. Neither you or the enemy team are very restricted in terms of where you can build your spawns, so extending a network of spawn points across the map is what ultimately allows you to gain map control and win the game. So taking a look back at the map, the enemy isn't going to be necessarily spawning here, but rather they might be here, or here, or here, or here. There are 5 types of spawn points. At the start of the game, you can only spawn in the team's headquarters, which are one of the 3 points on the edge of the map. These will always be available unless the team is capturing the last point, which will cause the closest of these spawns to be disabled. Next, we have garrisons, which are the team-wide spawn points that can be built by squad leaders and commanders, and are the primary tool for having your team be able to spawn anywhere that is not the headquarters. Garrisons are the single most important thing in the entire game. Your team can have the best shooters and tank players in the game, but without garrisons, you will lose every single time. Garrisons can be built around an objective, off to the side, or even in enemy territory, allowing the enemy team to spawn around your flanks or even behind you. Basically, whenever you see an enemy, you should think about where they came from, as that will lead you back to their spawn point, allowing you to destroy it and eliminate enemy presence in that area. That is the only way of doing that, since killing enemies doesn't actually bring the enemy team any closer to losing. There are no tickets in this game, so killing enemies is just something you need to do to be able to find and destroy enemy spawn points. Officers can also build outposts, which are spawn points where only their own squad can spawn on. They are more flexible than a garrison in the sense that they are slightly easier to build and have a shorter delay between spawn waves of 20 seconds versus 40 for a garrison, but they are also weaker as they are easier to destroy and, as I mentioned before, only allow your own squad to spawn in. Inexperienced squad leaders will often be content with working only with outposts instead of building garrisons. This mindset basically dismisses the importance of the rest of the team, and in a game where your squad is 6 players and the teams are made up of 50 players, this is a massive mistake. Having a garrison also allows you to fall back and spawn there in case your outpost gets destroyed, so think of garrisons as save files and outposts as quick saves. In order to build a garrison or outpost, the officer needs to take out his watch, hold right click, and then left click where you want to deploy the object. For consoles, this will be L2 and R2, or left trigger and right trigger. To toggle between the OP and garrison, you move the mouse wheel. I'm pretty sure the console equivalent is hitting up and down on the arrow keys. I'm not sure about that though, but the UI will tell you what you need to do. Garrisons can be built in your territory using 50 supplies or in the first 2 enemy squares ahead of the front lines using 100 supplies, and they will always need to be at least 200 meters from one another. Garrisons in the enemy territory, called red zone garrisons, will become locked if an enemy is a 100-meter radius of them, while those in friendly territory have a much smaller lockdown of about 15 meters. The squares on the map are 200 meters across, by the way, so use that as reference. Enemy garrisons can be dismantled by holding the interact button or by blowing them up with a satchel charge, a rocket, or a tank shell. OPs can be destroyed by simply walking close to them or by explosives, including grenades, which won't destroy garrisons. You can get the supplies you need to build a garrison from a supply truck, an airdrop, or a support player, and you should always prefer using the support player because the other two can be easily seen or heard and require resources to use, while a soldier dropping a box is silent, faster, and requires no resources. There are 2 more types of spawn points: the half-track, which is an APC that transforms into a garrison when the engine is shut off, and the airhead, which is a parachuted temporary garrison that lasts for 2 minutes. Movement of a half-track should always be up to the commander or a squad leader. You should never, ever move a half-track without explicit permission of the commander. Moving it resets the spawn and will often end with the half-track getting destroyed, so this is basically the same as giving the enemy 100 kills in an instant and wasting a bunch of resources in the process, so don't do it. And this is actually how you should think about spawn points in the game. Killing 5 enemies is okay, but destroying a single garrison is like killing 100 or 200 enemy players. That's what makes them so important, and that's why finding and destroying enemy garrisons or other spawn points is the key to the entire game. All spawn points light up red when enemies are near, which is another reason why you want to have as many of them as possible, because they act as radar to detect enemies, and this is obviously exceedingly useful. When you look at the map, you should take note of which spawn points are lighting up to create a map in your mind of where the enemy is. Think of these as quest markers where you need to go fight off the enemy team. As a squad, your basic gameplay loop should be something like this. You think about where you need to build the garrison to improve your team's map control. Do you have garrisons around your back line that will help defend against an enemy airhead? Do you have garrisons near the front lines so your team can attack? If the answer to these is yes, then build a flanking garrison, either defensive or offensive, by placing it on the red zone. Your squad leader should use the outpost as a stepping stone between a garrison that you spawn on and your target location. Once you secure the area, you build a garrison and you keep going. Now let's talk about how to actually capture an objective, because this again isn't as simple as you'd expect. Each map has a total of 15 different strongpoints. 5 of them get picked at random when the server switches maps, so you get different strongpoints or objectives each time you play a map. In Warfare mode, you can capture sectors from the 4 squares adjacent to each strongpoint, while in Offensive mode, which is the mode where one team defends and the other attacks, the sector can only be captured from inside the black circle, which is the strongpoint. I hope at some point they change this, because it makes absolutely no sense for that to be the case, but here we are. There are level 200 players out there that do not understand that the capture area in Warfare mode is actually 4 squares and not just the black circle, and given a lot of people ask me how to know which 4 squares are the capture sector, here's how you find out. You start at the edge of the map that's not grayed out, and you go 2 by 2, 2 by 2, 2 by 2, and so on. Whatever 4 squares the strong point is in, then that's the capture area. Capture rate is constant. There is no speeding up or slowing down how fast you can capture in this game. It takes 2 minutes to capture an area in warfare mode and 1 minute to capture it in offensive mode. Which team makes progress towards capturing depends exclusively on what team has more players within the capture area. Being inside the strong point in warfare mode multiplies your cap weight by 2. So if one team has 1 player inside the black circle and the other has 2 outside, then no cap progress will be made. Don't be fooled by thinking that you can defend a point by just holding the black circle. You can't. One of the most common mistakes in this game is to build a garrison inside the black circle and spawn there and try and move out while the enemy is attacking you. For the enemy team, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. This is one of the main ways teams lose control of an objective. People just spawn inside the black circle and try to defend it as they get killed and outspawned by the enemy coming in from multiple angles. What you need to do in this situation is spawn further back, even if it means spawning at the headquarters and then building garrisons around the objective so you can control the entire sector and not just the black circle. Map control is what you need to achieve in Hell Let Loose, and that's the way you do it. Now let's talk about squad composition. There are 3 types of squads: infantry, armor, and recon. There might be an artillery or mortar squad in the future. I'm not sure about that, and that's actually one of the reasons I won't be going over artillery in this video. I will add a link to my artillery guide down in the video description, but the mechanics of artillery might or might not change in the near future. An infantry squad should always have a squad leader. Some people will create a squad, then leave as soon as more players join and then rejoin, so they aren't forced into the officer role, and you will end up with a squad without an officer. Avoid these squads like the plague. If you have to play officer, then don't worry about it too much. Check out this video I made on why new players should play officer, and you should be fine. I do recommend adjusting the volume sliders for the voice chat so you can clearly hear your squad mates, while officer chat is at the level of a conversation of a nearby table at a restaurant, low enough so it doesn't bother you, but high enough so you can listen to keywords and pay attention when you need to. There are a bunch of different classes available, so let's go over them quickly. Pay no attention to the actual name of the classes, just pay attention to the loadouts they have, since the names can be a bit misleading. The Assault, for example, is an excellent class to destroy tanks with, and is also a better automatic rifleman than the actual automatic rifleman. Alright, let's start off with your basic rifleman. Riflemans get the army standard rifle, so the Garand for the Americans, the Kar 98 for the Germans, and so on, as well as a couple of grenades and a box of ammunition. Ammunition boxes are used to replenish bullets, and just like all the other boxes in the game, they are dropped on the ground by looking down and pressing on the trigger or mouse 1. There are also explosive ammo boxes which are carried by the second supply kit and some other kits as well. These replenish grenades, rockets, mines, that type of thing. The American Rifleman is actually a really decent class because the Garand is the best weapon the Allies have, so don't be afraid to take it over the automatic Rifleman, which has the BAR, which is not very good. The Assault is one of the best classes in the entire game. The first kits are pretty decent, but later on you get access to a satchel, which can be used to blow up tanks or defensive structures, as well as a grenadier kit that gets a ton of different grenades, both smoke grenades and frag grenades, so it's really useful. The satchel will blow up anything inside its 25-meter blast radius, even through walls, so it's super useful for clearing out enemies inside a building, like a church, or behind a wall for destroying tanks, and so on. If you press T to bring the HUD up, or hold up on the D-pad on console, you will see a red circle that shows when a satchel is going to blow up. If you can see the red circle, then that means you're inside the blast radius, so whenever someone shouts that they put a satchel down, use this to make sure you don't get blown up by accident. All of this makes the Assault one of the most versatile classes in the game, and depending on the army, you get some of the best weapons, like the STG-44, the G-43, the SVT, and the PPSH. It takes a while to get to the better kits in the class, but it is absolutely worth it. The Automatic Rifleman is a worse assault class in every single way. You don't get any smoke grenades, and some weapons, like the BAR I mentioned before, are just plain bad. The German and Soviet kits are decent, but I find smoke grenades to be exceptionally useful in this game, so I don't really like taking this kit unless I really want an STG-44 or something like that. Alright, the medic. Everyone that follows this channel knows that I think medics are worthless, and that is pretty much the general consensus of any of the veteran players in the game and any of the competitive teams, so I will explain why that is the case. First off, there are no tickets or points, so reviving someone doesn't help your team that way. It does prevent the loss of a resource called manpower, but the amount you save is a fraction of the amount you generate each map, so it really doesn't make any difference. Second, you cannot revive people that get blown up or get headshotted, so the better the enemy team is, the worse your medics are. Third, and I've tested this multiple times, waiting for a medic to revive you takes on average a lot longer than it takes to respawn. And lastly, a lot of people argue that you lose valuable time or distance getting back to where you were once you spawn. However, if you're in the cap sector and your spawn is in the cap sector, then it literally makes no difference. The support class, on the other hand, is the most important class that isn't the squad leader. Support players carry supplies which are necessary to build garrisons or to build AT guns or other structures such as repair stations, walls, tank traps, and so on. You usually want the support class to be a rotating role among your squad members because it takes 5 minutes to be able to drop supplies again once you drop them in the first place, but if someone else takes the role, then you can have another set of supplies right away. And using this technique, you can get 100 supplies really quickly for a redstone garrison without needing a truck or a parachute drop to give away your position. It takes 40 seconds to do this, so it's actually really fast to get a redstone garrison down, and it makes you wonder why more people aren't doing this. Alright, update 13 added the flamethrower for the support class, which is essentially a meme weapon. It's the only weapon in the game that doesn't deal any damage at all past 25 meters, and it takes a while to be able to shoot it because you need to very slowly ADS with it before firing, so it's not actually very useful. Stick to the second support loadout if you need a better weapon than the first one, and ignore the flamethrower 99% of the time. The machine gunner is a pretty straightforward class. I've recently done a guide for this which explains how to be effective with the machine gun, so check that out. But the short of it is you want to be as far away as possible and use lots of suppression. The closer you are, the easier it is for the enemy to shoot you in the head. This is a class that requires awareness of enemy movement around the map and is better for defending than it is for attacking. The anti-tank is one of the best classes for any team, but it's important to note that the German Panzerschreck is significantly more powerful than the Allied bazooka. The German Panzerschreck can penetrate every tank from all sides except for heavy tanks from the front, while the Allied can't hit anything heavier than a medium from neither the front or the sides. The anti-tank has a variety of different loadouts. You can basically opt for a bazooka, a buildable AT gun, which is excellent as you can penetrate any tank from any angle, and a satchel charge. Do not sleep on the AT gun. It's extremely easy to build. Just ask your squad's support player to drop supplies, and it is incredibly powerful. Lastly, we have the engineer. The engineer is mostly used to build resource nodes or defensive structures, but it's also used because he gets access to another loadout that has a satchel, which again is extremely useful. Other than that, the kits for the engineer are pretty mediocre, except for the kit with the German MP40. But yeah, trip mines that you can get as engineer are useful for defending a garrison or corridor, but they aren't game-changing or anything. Sometimes they don't even go off when they should. And there's always a better class for you to pick most of the time. I would go Rifleman over engineer almost always, unless I really need a satchel. Armor crews are fairly basic in composition. They have a maximum of 3 players, 1 officer and 2 crew members. This is the only officer that doesn't get an outpost and cannot build any garrisons. You need to be part of an armor crew to operate any of the tanks, so any vehicle that has a cannon, you need to be an armor crew in order to operate. Tanks have 3 positions, a driver, a gunner, and a spotter. The driver controls the tank using the WASD keys, but you'll first need to start the engine by holding down E, and you'll also need to perform gear changes by using shift and control. Once you get into first gear for the tank, you wait until the revs max out, and then you start shifting from second to fourth gear, always waiting for the revs to reach their maximum before switching gears, otherwise the tank might stall. Reverse is done by pressing Ctrl many times until you reach the reverse gear, and then you press W, which can be a bit counterintuitive, but yeah, basically W is the gas pedal. Depending on the tank, drivers can also fire a machine gun using the mouse to aim and shoot. Gunners control the turret using WASD as well, and can select between HE and AP rounds, and sometimes even smoke rounds. As soon as you get into a tank, remember to press R to get a round into the chamber, which you will also need to reload after every single shot. Right-clicking will fire your machine gun, so you can take out enemy infantry as well. Both HE and AP rounds have splash damage, but obviously the splash damage on the HE rounds is much larger, and the AP rounds are intended for shooting at other tanks. Shooting your main gun will instantly give away your position to anyone paying attention because it can be heard from very, very far away. So being able to destroy other tanks very much depends on you getting the jump on them, so you don't want to give away your position unnecessarily. Never, ever solo tank, and if you have to for some reason run a two-man tank crew, you should use the driver and spotter positions as default, with the spotter switching to the gunner as needed, because being able to look around is way more important than being ready to shoot. Tanking in this game requires a lot of coordination and understanding of what the capabilities of a medium are versus a heavy tank and so on. I suggest taking a look at my tank guide videos, which are a bit outdated but still hold up, or check out the channel Fresh Baked Goods for some great examples on how to play tanks in the game. Recon squads are made of two people, an officer and a sniper. They are unfortunately used a lot to camp the enemy artillery, because that's the only way to actually counter the enemy artillery. It's one of the reasons artillery might get a rework in the future. So yeah, if you're playing Recon, you might get asked to go spawn camp the artillery, which is kind of boring and annoying, but it is what it is. Unlike infantry squad leaders, Recon officers can deploy their outpost anywhere on the map, making them ideal for harassing the enemy backlines and of course camping the artillery. Alright, that's all the different classes and squad types. Now let's talk a bit about the importance of communication. Play this game with a headset and a microphone if you can. A headset is absolutely vital to identify where shots are coming from and to listen to enemy footsteps, as speakers won't really help you with that. And microphone is even more important because being able to talk to other players is often one of the most valuable things that you can do in the game. Letting someone know, like, hey, there are enemies coming in from the north, or there's enemies behind us, or asking them for supplies or whatever, will enhance your experience in the game significantly. There are 3 separate voice chats: proximity chat, squad chat, and command chat. On PC, these correspond to your V, C, and X keys. Squad and command chat will work at any distance, while proximity chat, of course, will only be heard by teammates around you. The enemy can't listen to any of these channels. So yeah, if you're shy, then I'd say get over your shyness and talk. Don't talk too much, especially not in command chat. Keep your communication down to the absolutely most crucial information. So things like calling out enemy garrisons or airheads, tanks and heavy infantry presence, and responding to requests to fall back or attack. Just as important as the voice comms are the map markers and pings. As a soldier, you can ping with your middle mouse button, and that creates a temporary alert that only gets seen by your squad. It's really useful for pointing out where enemies are, or by referencing different things. Officers can use a wide variety of different markers by either holding down the middle mouse button or by right-clicking on the map. There will be an indication of who can actually see the marker for each of these. So for example, the place garrison mark can only be seen by other officers. It cannot be seen by your squad. So if you want to mark for your support player to drop supplies, either use the request supply mark or the move or observe markers. One of the most useful things you can do as officer is to use the markers and keep updating them. If you're engaging an enemy squad, then you drop an infantry mark, so at a quick glance, an officer can understand what's going on your part of the map. If there's a tank moving around, then you mark that with the tank mark, and you keep updating the mark until that tank is out of sight. Moving on, if you're new to the game, do not play Commander. And by new to the game, I mean you have 50 hours or less. If you want to learn how to actually play Commander, then first play a squad leader and get really good at being squad leader, because that's going to teach you a lot of what the Commander actually needs to do. I have multiple videos on how to play Commander, as it plays very, very differently from the other classes in the game. So check that out before you do, because you can very easily be more of a detriment to your team than actually help. The Commander's main objective is to provide opportunities for his team by providing garrisons, half-tracks, airheads, tanks, and so on through the use of his abilities like bombing runs or recon planes. The commander, however, should not be looking at the map the entire game. They should actively be building as many garrisons as humanly possible. If your commander is playing as an assault player, or he's prone at the headquarters looking at the map the entire game, then he's a bad commander. Now, a very quick note about structures. The engineer can build defensive structures like barbed wire, bunkers, walls, and so on. The most useful structures that you can build, though, are resource nodes, which provide 10 points of the corresponding resource per minute to the commander. There are 3 types of nodes: munitions, fuel, and manpower. The commander uses these resources to spawn in tanks, bombing runs, airheads, and so on, and munitions are also spent when firing artillery rounds or when using an AT gun. Ideally, nodes should be built at your headquarters at the start of the game to maximize their uptime and to prevent them from getting destroyed, but since you can't drop supplies there with a truck, most engineers will drive to the end of the second line of squares and drop supplies there to build them behind the line. Why? Because nodes also get destroyed if the enemy caps a sector, so you want them as far back as humanly possible. Never ever take the first supply truck that spawns in a match to go build nodes. Garrisons are way more important than nodes at all times, so taking away a supply truck from a squad leader that might use them to build a garrison at the start of the game is a big no-no. You can also find leftover supplies around the map after a box has been used to build a garrison, so use those for node construction. It's probably the quickest way to get the nodes down, even though the placement won't be necessarily ideal. Defensive structures are usually not very useful in most situations. They work wonders for defending a point in offensive mode when it's an area that can actually be locked down fairly easily by walls and barbed wire, but for the most part, the time it takes to build them and the number of supplies required for them are disproportionate to their usefulness in modes like warfare. If you do want to build stuff, then ask your squad leader or a more veteran player what to build and where, as inexperienced engineers can hamper their own team by building stuff in the wrong place. Just like with basically every other topic I have touched on, I have a specific video guide on how to build defenses, so go check that out in the guide playlist. Alright, now I'll end the video with some general tips. Number 1, you will die a lot in Hell Let Loose. Do not get frustrated, try and take a longer route, ask for help, move as if you only had 1 life, and you will slowly start to get better. Pay attention to gunfire and other sounds. If they're shooting nearby, then think about whether the enemy might have line of sight to you or not, and move accordingly. Second, 20 minutes after the start of each round, airheads become available for use. This means that if 20 minutes into the game you do not have at least 2 or 3 garrisons around your defensive point, then the enemy commander can drop an airhead behind it, and half the enemy team will be able to spawn there before you even understand what's going on. 2 minutes later, you will have lost that point. It is that fast, so make sure you build those garrisons and take notes of any parachutes you see in the sky to identify enemy airheads. Expanding on this, another point you have to remember is you are only ever 4 minutes away from losing a match and 8 minutes away from total defeat. Say you are winning 4-1, it takes 2 minutes to cap a point, so it takes 4 minutes for you to be losing 2-3, and 8 minutes for you to lose 5-0. Usually the only way to counter this is to hit escape and redeploy to teleport yourself across the map and get to where you need to be as fast as possible. Redeploying is the fastest way to move around the map, to either go back to defend or get into an enemy sector to help an attack. There is no penalty for doing this, and you will never be good at this game if you do not redeploy when you need to. There are primarily 2 ways teams lose in this game. One is by not having enough garrisons, and the other is by not redeploying to those garrisons when needed. I cannot stress this enough. Garrisons and other spawns get destroyed or disabled if the enemy captures the area that they are in, so if you have a decent network of spawns, it is always better to fall back and defend, preventing the loss of those spawns, than it is to continue an attack and risk losing all map control that you previously had. And lastly, number 4, join a squad with people that actually talk. Keep jumping around different squads until you find a squad leader that actually talks, because playing with a good squad leader will teach you more about the game in a single match than playing 20 matches without one, and it will also be a much better experience. So that's it, guys. This is a long video. There's a whole lot of things that I didn't mention. There's a lot more to learn about Hell Let Loose. Definitely check out the other videos I have on the game. If you enjoyed the video, then please give it a like. Remember to subscribe. Please help me reach that goal. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope I will catch you in the next one.